A man stands before his bathroom mirror each morning, brushing his teeth, combing his hair, preparing for another day. But what he doesn't see is the invisible figure standing behind him, whispering constant commentary into his mind. You're not good enough. You'll never amount to anything. Remember what happened last time you tried. Look at your bank account. Look at your relationships. This is who you are. This invisible figure is not some external demon or malevolent spirit. It is the accumulation of every thought he has allowed to take root in his consciousness, every assumption he has accepted as truth, every mental meal he has consumed without question. Day after day, year after year, he has been feeding his mind a steady diet of limitation, doubt, and past failures, never realizing that these thoughts are not just passive observations, but active creative forces shaping his reality. The tragedy is not that this man is unique. The tragedy is that he represents millions of human beings who have unknowingly imprisoned themselves in cells built from their own thoughts. They carry the key to their freedom, yet they cannot see it because they have been conditioned to look everywhere except within their own consciousness for the source of their circumstances. Every human being lives simultaneously in two worlds. There is the visible world of facts and conditions, the world that seems solid and unchangeable, the world that tells us we must accept things as they are. Then there is the invisible world of consciousness, the realm where all change begins, the creative workshop where tomorrow's experiences are being molded right now through the thoughts we think and the assumptions we hold. Most people believe they are victims of the visible world, that they must adapt to circumstances beyond their control. They look at their current situation and say, this is reality, I must be realistic. But what they call reality is nothing more than the hardened manifestation of yesterday's mental diet. Every condition in their life, every relationship, every financial situation, every health challenge is the fruit of seeds they've planted in consciousness through the thoughts they have habitually entertained. The invisible prison is constructed from bars made of mental habits so familiar they feel like truth. I'm not lucky, I'm not talented, I come from the wrong background, I'm too old, I'm too young, I don't have connections, the economy is bad, the world is against people like me. These are not observations, they are assumptions, and every assumption, consciously chosen or unconsciously accepted, becomes the foundation upon which experience is built. But what if the very thoughts that seem to describe your limitations are actually the invisible forces creating them? What if the voice that whispers, be realistic, is the same voice that keeps you trapped in a reality far smaller than what you were born to experience? What if your mind, which you have allowed to feed on whatever random thoughts drift through it, could be trained to become your most powerful ally in creating the life you desire? When even one person begins to live as a conscious creator, it creates a crack in the collective assumption of limitation that has held humanity in bondage for centuries. Others begin to see that transformation is possible, that circumstances are not fixed, that every person possesses the power to create their desired experience. The choice that stands before every person who understands these principles is simple but profound. Will you continue to be a victim of your thoughts, or will you become their master? Will you allow your consciousness to be shaped by external circumstances, or will you shape external circumstances through your consciousness? Will you accept the limitations that have been imposed upon you, or will you assume the possibilities that have always been available to you? This choice cannot be made once and forgotten. It must be made moment by moment, day by day, through the constant practice of assuming the best rather than accepting the worst. It requires the courage to hope when hope seems foolish, to assume success when failure appears more likely, to maintain faith when faith seems unreasonable. The 30-day mental diet is not a quick fix, but a foundation for a lifetime of conscious living. It is an invitation to discover the divine power that resides within your own consciousness, the creative force that has been shaping your experience all along. The question is not whether you have this power, but whether you will learn to use it consciously. Those who accept this challenge will discover that the world is far more magical than they ever imagined. They will find that circumstances that seemed impossible become natural, that desires that seemed unreachable become inevitable, that the life they dreamed of becomes the life they live. They will realize that what they called miracles are simply the natural expression of consciousness creating in a alignment with its deepest desires. The invitation is extended to you now. Your consciousness is the garden in which your future is being cultivated. The seeds you plant today through your assumptions will become the harvest you reap tomorrow through your experience. Choose your mental diet as carefully as you choose your physical diet, for it is creating the substance of your life. The mirror that showed you your limitations can now show you your possibilities. The invisible prison that held you captive can now become the invisible workshop where you create your dreams. The thoughts that once worked against you can now work for you. The choice is yours, and the time is now. You are not what you appear to be. You are not what circumstances suggest you are. You are not what others have told you you are. You are what you assume yourself to be in the secret chambers of your own consciousness. Assume the best, for in assumption lies the power to create the life you were born to live. The ancient promise stands eternal. As within, so without. Your outer world is the faithful reflection of your inner world. Change your inner world through disciplined assumption, and your outer world must change to match. This is not hope. This is law. This is not theory. This is the fundamental principle by which all experience is created. Feed your consciousness with assumptions of abundance, love, success, and joy. Starve it of doubt, fear, limitation, and despair. In 30 days, you will begin to see the fruits of your mental diet appearing in your experience. In time, you will understand that you have always been the author of your own story, and now you have learned to write it consciously. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and it is consciousness itself. Enter that kingdom now through assumption, and let your life become the living proof that imagination creates reality, that consciousness is the only true cause, and that every person possesses the divine power to create their world anew. The moment a person begins to understand that consciousness is not a passive observer but an active creator, everything changes. The victim becomes the artist. The prisoner discovers he has always held the key. The poor man realizes his poverty exists first in his imagination before it appears in his bank account. The lonely person sees that their isolation is maintained by their assumption that they are unlovable. This understanding did not come easily to one man who would later teach thousands about the creative power of human imagination. Born in the West Indies, he arrived in New York in the 1920s with little more than a burning curiosity about the deeper workings of human consciousness. He was not a scholar in the traditional sense, nor did he come from a background of privilege or advantage. He was simply a man who refused to accept that circumstances were fixed, that people were doomed to repeat the patterns of their past. In the depths of the Great Depression, when despair filled the streets and hope seemed like a luxury few could afford, this man made a discovery that would revolutionize his understanding of human potential. He realized that every person's life is nothing more than their assumptions made manifest. Every condition, every relationship, every experience flows from the deep-seated beliefs about reality that we carry in consciousness. He called this insight the mental diet, because he recognized that just as physical food builds and maintains the body, mental food builds and maintains the experiences of life. Most people are careful about what they put into their bodies, but completely careless about what they put into their minds. They would never dream of eating garbage for dinner, yet they feast their consciousness on thoughts of limitation, fear, and doubt from morning until night. The breakthrough came when he understood that human imagination is not just a faculty for entertainment or creativity. Imagination is the divine power within every person, the very force through which all experience is created. But imagination does not create from nothing. It creates from the assumptions we hold, the beliefs we entertain, the mental food we consume day after day. When he began to apply this understanding to his own life, the results were immediate and profound. By carefully selecting what thoughts he would accept and what assumptions he would maintain, by creating a disciplined mental diet, he began to experience changes that others called miraculous. But he knew they were not miracles at all. They were simply the natural result of aligning his inner world with his desired outer experience. This discovery connects to a golden thread that runs through every wisdom tradition since the beginning of recorded history. In ancient Egypt, the mystery schools taught that as above, so below, meaning that the invisible realm of consciousness creates the visible realm of experience. The greatest minds of antiquity understood that the outer world is always a reflection of the inner world, that change must begin in consciousness before it can appear in circumstances. The Hebrew tradition gave us the most powerful statement of this truth through the words attributed to the divine presence, I am that I am. This was not merely a religious declaration, but a fundamental law of consciousness. Whatever follows I am in your awareness becomes your experience. I am wealthy or I am poor, I am loved or I am rejected, I am healthy or I am sick. The creative power lies not in the conditions themselves, but in the consciousness that accepts them as true. The early Christian teachings, before they became institutionalized and ritualized, were revolutionary instructions in consciousness. When we read, "Ask and it shall be given," this was not a promise that some external deity would grant wishes. It was a statement about the law of assumption. What you assume to be true, what you ask for in consciousness by accepting it as already accomplished, must become your experience. The Renaissance period saw a resurgence of this ancient wisdom through the alchemists, who were not merely trying to turn lead into gold. They were mapping the process by which consciousness transforms the base metal of doubt and limitation into the gold of faith and achievement. Their mysterious symbols and coded language describe the inner work of mental transformation that every person must undertake to change their life. In our modern era, quantum physics has begun to validate what mystics have always known. The observer affects the observed. Consciousness plays a fundamental role in determining what becomes real. The very act of measurement, of focused attention, influences the behavior of subatomic particles. This is not mysticism. This is science pointing toward the same truth that wisdom traditions have taught for millennia. The thread that connects all these teachings across all cultures and time periods is the understanding that human consciousness is creative. No creative in some vague metaphorical sense, but creative in the most literal and practical way. The thoughts you think, the assumptions you maintain, the mental diet you consume creates the circumstances of your life as surely as physical diet creates the condition of your body. Yet despite this ancient wisdom, despite the validation of modern science, most people continue to live as if they are powerless victims of external forces. They consume mental junk food all day long and wonder why their lives feel unsatisfying. They feed their consciousness on news of disaster, thoughts of lack, assumptions of limitation, and then cannot understand why their experience reflects these inner conditions. The time has come for a great awakening, a mass realization that every person possesses within themselves the power to transform their life through the disciplined cultivation of consciousness. This is not about positive thinking or wishful fantasy. This is about understanding and applying the fundamental law by which all experience is created. The human mind possesses an extraordinary capacity for self-deception, but this capacity is not a flaw in our design. It is actually evidence of our creative power. Every day, millions of people prove to themselves that their limitations are real, that their circumstances are fixed, that change is impossible. They gather evidence, build convincing arguments, and create elaborate justifications for why things must remain as they are. This is not intellectual honesty. This is the creative force of consciousness working in reverse. Consider how the mind operates when it has accepted a limiting assumption. A person who believes they are unlucky will notice every instance that confirms this belief while completely overlooking evidence to the contrary. They will remember the job they didn't get, the relationship that ended badly, the investment that failed. Their mind becomes a detective, constantly gathering proof that they are indeed unlucky. Meanwhile, opportunities pass unnoticed, synchronicities go unrecognized, and positive outcomes are dismissed as coincidence. This is not conscious deception. The person genuinely believes they are being objective, facing facts, dealing with reality. But what they call objectivity is actually a highly selective filtering system that only allows information to pass through that confirms their existing assumptions. Modern psychology has given names to these mechanisms: confirmation bias, selective attention, motivated reasoning. But these terms describe the same creative process that mystics have always understood, only working in service of limitation rather than expansion. The brain's reticular activating system serves as the gatekeeper of perception, determining what information enters conscious awareness from the millions of bits of data that bombard our senses every moment. This system is not neutral. It is programmed by our assumptions, our beliefs, our habitual thoughts. When someone assumes they are poor, their reticular activating system highlights every sign of lack, while filtering out evidence of abundance. When they assume they are unlovable, it notices rejection while ignoring acceptance. Recent research in neuroplasticity has revealed that the brain literally rewires itself based on repeated thoughts and experiences. Neural pathways strengthen with use and weaken with disuse. This means that habitual thoughts do not just influence perception, they actually change the physical structure of the brain. A person who regularly thinks thoughts of limitation is literally building a brain that is more capable of perceiving limitation and less capable of recognizing opportunity. Scientists studying visualization and mental rehearsal have found that the brain cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. Athletes who mentally rehearse their performance show measurable improvement in their actual abilities. This research validates what practitioners of conscious creation have always known. The imagination is not separate from reality. It is the laboratory where reality is formed. Studies of the placebo effect reveal the extraordinary power of belief to influence physical reality. Patients who believe they are receiving powerful medicine often experience healing even when given sugar pills. Their assumption that they are being healed triggers actual physiological changes. If belief can influence the body to this degree, how much more can it influence the circumstances of life? Yet despite all this evidence, most people remain trapped in loops of mental malnutrition. They continue to feed their consciousness the same limiting thoughts that created their current circumstances, expecting somehow that different results will magically appear. They consume media that confirms their fears, engage in conversations that reinforce their limitations, and rehearse scenarios of failure in their imagination, all while wondering why their lives do not improve. The reason these patterns persist is that they feel safe. Familiar limitations seem more comfortable than unknown possibilities. The mind that has been trained to expect disappointment knows how to handle disappointment. It has developed coping mechanisms, defense strategies, and explanations for why things go wrong. To step into the unknown territory of expecting good feels dangerous because it lacks these familiar defenses. Doubt reveals itself as the ultimate creative force working against desire. It is not simply the absence of faith. It is faith in reverse, faith in limitation, faith in impossibility. Doubt is assumption turned inside out, the creative power of consciousness convinced that what is desired cannot be achieved. The most insidious aspect of doubt is its disguise. It rarely appears as obvious negative thinking. Instead, it clothes itself in the respectable garments of realism, logic, and past experience. It whispers, be practical. Don't get your hopes up. Remember what happened last time. Look at the facts. These statements sound reasonable, even wise, but they are actually the voice of limitation masquerading as wisdom. Doubt draws its power from the evidence of the senses and the testimony of past experience. It points to current circumstances and says, this is what is real, this is what you must accept. But current circumstances are nothing more than the crystallized form of past assumptions. To use present conditions as evidence of what is possible is to mistake the effect for the cause, to confuse the symptom with the disease. Society provides endless nourishment for doubt through collective beliefs about limitation. We are told that only a few can succeed, that resources are scarce, that life is hard, that we must struggle to achieve anything worthwhile. These ideas are not natural laws. They are collective assumptions that have been accepted and repeated until they seem like truth. But they are no more true than any other assumption, and they have power only because we give them power through our acceptance. The media-industrial complex has become a sophisticated doubt delivery system, constantly feeding consciousness with images and stories of lack, danger, and impossibility. News programs focus on disasters, crime, and conflict not because these events are more real than positive developments, but because they capture attention and confirm existing fears. Entertainment often portrays struggle and limitation as heroic, while making success seem either impossible or corrupt. Social media amplifies doubt by creating artificial comparisons and highlighting the apparent success of others in ways that make our own achievements seem inadequate. It feeds the assumption that everyone else is living a better life while we remain stuck in circumstances we cannot change. But these comparisons are based on illusions, carefully curated presentations that have little connection to reality. Personal relationships can become doubt-feeding systems when they are based on shared limitations rather than mutual growth. Friends and family members, often with the best intentions, remind us of our past failures, warn us against hoping for too much, and encourage us to accept things as they are. This is not love. It is fear masquerading as care. The path to freedom begins with understanding that doubt is not rational analysis but creative assumption. It is not protective wisdom but destructive imagination. Once this is recognized, the work of creating a disciplined mental diet can begin. The foundation of healthy mental nutrition rests on the understanding that consciousness is always creating, always assuming, always imagining. The question is not whether you will use your creative power, but how you will use it. Will you create consciously or unconsciously, deliberately or randomly, in service of your desires or in opposition to them? A proper mental diet begins with the recognition that thoughts are food for consciousness. Just as you would not eat spoiled food for your body, you must not accept spoiled thoughts for your mind. This requires constant vigilance, not the tense watchfulness of fear, but the relaxed awareness of someone who knows their power and chooses to use it wisely. The morning mental breakfast consists of feeding consciousness, essence with the assumption of the wish fulfilled. Before the day begins, before the evidence of the senses starts to crowd in with its testimony of limitation, you must assume the feeling of being the person you desire to be. Not in some distant future, but right now, in this moment. You must feel what it would be like if your desire were already accomplished, if your assumption were already fact. This is not pretending or make-believe. This is working with the creative mechanism of consciousness itself. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is the sensation of assumption becoming reality. It is the bridge between imagination and experience, the vibrational frequency that attracts corresponding conditions. During the day, mental vigilance means catching thoughts before they become assumptions. When a limiting thought arises, you do not fight it or judge it. You simply replace it with its opposite. If lack appears in consciousness, you assume abundance. If rejection threatens, you assume acceptance. If failure suggests itself, you assume success. This is not denial of current facts, but refusal to accept them as permanent. The evening mental digestion involves reviewing the day, not as it appeared to the senses, but as you would have preferred it to be. This practice, called revision, involves rewriting the script of your day in imagination, experiencing events as you wish they had occurred. This is not about changing the past, but about changing the assumptions that create the future. The technique of revision works because consciousness does not operate in linear time. In the realm of imagination, all possibilities exist simultaneously. By revising the day's events in consciousness, you are not changing what happened, but changing the assumptions that will create tomorrow's experiences. You are editing the script of your life at the level where all scripts are written. A mental diet must be maintained consistently for at least 30 days to create lasting change. This is not an arbitrary number, but reflects the time needed for new neural pathways to strengthen and old patterns to weaken. During this period, you must be willing to fast from thoughts of doubt, fear, and limitation as completely as you would fast from food in a physical fast. The 30-day period often includes a testing phase where old patterns seem to intensify before they dissolve. This is not a sign that the process is failing, but evidence that it is working. Consciousness is reorganizing itself around new assumptions, and the old patterns are making their final bid for survival. Persistence through this phase is what separates those who transform their lives from those who remain trapped in familiar limitations. The goal is not to think positive thoughts, but to think assumptive thoughts. Positive thinking without assumption is like trying to plant seeds in concrete. Assumption is the fertile soil in which mental seeds grow into physical conditions. When you assume you are wealthy, you are not trying to convince yourself of something that is not true. You are recognizing the truth that exists in consciousness before it appears in experience. The most profound resistance to a mental diet comes not from external forces, but from the very consciousness that seeks to be transformed. This resistance appears as a fierce loyalty to familiar patterns, even when those patterns create suffering. The mind that has been trained to expect limitation will fight to maintain that expectation, not because it loves limitation, but because it fears the unknown territory that lies beyond familiar boundaries. When someone begins to assume new possibilities for their life, their old mental habits respond like an immune system rejecting foreign tissue. Thoughts of doubt arise with greater intensity, past failures seem more vivid, current circumstances appear more fixed and unchangeable. This is not evidence that the process is failing, it is evidence that deep change is beginning to occur. The resistance phenomenon manifests as a testing period where the commitment to new assumptions is challenged by apparently contrary evidence. A person who has begun to assume prosperity might face unexpected bills. Someone assuming perfect health might experience symptoms. An individual assuming loving relationships might encounter conflict. These experiences are not punishments or proof that the process does not work. They are the last expressions of old assumptions working their way out of consciousness. Social resistance often proves even more challenging than internal resistance. Friends and family members who have become accustomed to your limitations may unconsciously sabotage your efforts to transcend them. They may mock your new assumptions, remind you of past failures, or express concern that you are becoming unrealistic. This is not malice, but the natural response of consciousness that has accepted limitation as normal and feels threatened by evidence that limitation is not necessary. The crab bucket mentality reveals itself clearly during this phase. Just as crabs in a bucket will pull down any crab that tries to escape, people trapped in limiting assumptions often feel compelled to pull down anyone who attempts to rise above those limitations. They may disguise this as care, warning you against disappointment, encouraging you to be satisfied with what you have. But beneath these warnings lies fear that your success will highlight their own acceptance of limitation. The comfort of familiar mental patterns cannot be underestimated. Even painful patterns become comfortable through repetition. The mind that has learned to expect rejection knows how to handle rejection. It has developed coping mechanisms, defense strategies, and explanations that make the pain bearable. To assume acceptance means entering unknown territory where these familiar defenses are no longer needed or useful. Persistence through the resistance phase is what separates those who transform their lives from those who abandon their dreams at the first sign of difficulty. Persistence is not stubborn determination or forcing outcomes. It is the quiet, consistent maintenance of assumptions regardless of contrary evidence. It is the recognition that current circumstances are not permanent facts but temporary expressions of past assumptions that are already changing. The breakthrough comes when the tester becomes the tested. When consciousness realizes that the conditions of life are not fixed, that circumstances respond to assumptions, that the outer world is malleable to the inner world, everything changes. The victim consciousness dissolves and is replaced by creator consciousness. The prisoner realizes he has always held the key to his freedom. Living as a conscious creator means accepting complete responsibility for your experience. This is not the burden of self-blame for past mistakes, but the empowerment of recognizing your unlimited potential for future creation. Every condition in your life, every relationship, every circumstance flows from consciousness. When you truly understand this, you can no longer see yourself as a victim of external forces. The transformed individual moves through life with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing the source of all experience. They do not need to convince others of their worth because they have assumed it in consciousness. They do not need to struggle for success because they have felt its accomplishment in imagination. They do not need to worry about the future because they are creating it moment by moment through their assumptions. This transformation affects every area of life. In relationships, the person who has assumed they are lovable attracts love effortlessly. They do not need to chase or manipulate because they know they are worthy of love. Their assumption of worthiness creates the conditions that confirm their worthiness. The lonely person becomes magnetic not through technique but through the natural overflow of their assumed state. In career and finances, the individual who has assumed prosperity begins to notice opportunities that were always present but previously invisible. Their assumption of abundance creates the mental state that recognizes abundance. They do not need to know how their desire will be fulfilled because they have assumed it is already accomplished. The universe conspires to confirm their assumption through circumstances that appear as coincidence but are actually the natural expression of consciousness creating. Health transforms when the assumption of perfect health replaces the assumption of vulnerability. The body responds to the instructions of consciousness, and consciousness that assumes vitality creates the conditions for vitality. This is not mind over matter, but mind as matter, consciousness expressing itself through the physical vehicle. The conscious creator understands that every person they encounter is part of their own consciousness. They cannot see others as separate from themselves because they recognize that the outer world is a reflection of the inner world. This recognition creates natural compassion and understanding. They cannot condemn others without condemning themselves, cannot limit others without limiting themselves. Perhaps most importantly, the conscious creator becomes a beneficial presence in the world. Their assumption of sin of abundance creates conditions of abundance, not only for themselves but for everyone they encounter. Their assumption of love creates loving conditions for all. Their assumption of success creates opportunities for success wherever they go. They become a blessing to the world simply by being themselves. This understanding carries with it a profound responsibility. Once you know that consciousness creates, you can no longer create unconsciously without accepting the consequences. Every thought becomes a prayer. Every assumption becomes a command to the creative forces of the universe. The power that was once used unconsciously must now be wielded with wisdom and care. The stories of those who have successfully applied these principles are not fairy tales, but documented evidence of consciousness in action. These individuals did not possess special talents or advantages. They simply understood and applied the law of assumption with consistency and persistence. They fed their consciousness with assumptions of their desired state until those assumptions became their experience. The ripple effects of conscious creation extend far beyond the individual